Welcome to another video. Thanks for joining me and thanks for listening to some of my thoughts and ideas. I'm always curious as to what your thoughts and ideas are, so please feel free to leave them in the comments. And in this video I want to talk about a discussion I had the other day with a scientist who told a quote to me that was by Arthur C. Clarke, a British science writer, who said that magic is science that hasn't been discovered yet. And that made me think that science tends to focus more on the magic, whereas religion tends to focus more on the magician. And one of the things I wanted to touch upon is this idea that magic is science that hasn't been discovered yet. And I think it's interesting and exciting to figure out some of the magic around us, but we should also be cautious with what we then do with this magic, because in the past science has tried to play the magician and it tries to use this magic to in a way play God, and this can lead to some pretty devastating consequences. And I like to think of it sometimes as a small child who's discovered a box of magic or a box of matches. It's discovered this power and this new ability to create fire, but it's still a child who is very unaware of its surroundings and unaware of the dangers that this can lead to. And I heard a talk a couple of days ago by a lady who was talking about how religion, once it's used in political agendas, can cause quite negative results, and some of the harmful impacts that religion has had on humanity. But there was a lot of talk about science and the benefits of science, but I wanted to talk about an example of how science could be used in society and as a political agenda in a negative way, just to shed some light on human beings and the fact that we should maybe focus a little bit more on ourselves rather than our outward surroundings. And rather than focusing on the magic in the outside world, let's focus on the magic inside of ourselves, because we are the magic and we've certainly not figured ourselves out. But the example I wanted to give was in the 1940s, when science worked tirelessly and scientists worked tirelessly around the clock to discover some of the magic and to split an atom. And I don't want to get into too much detail, but I think we know what that led to, and maybe the negative outcomes that was, and the loss of life that came as a result of that. So in our society, we advance technology at an alarming rate, and we discover new things in the world and want to use that to manipulate our environment and try to control and tame nature. But learning to just flow with nature is something that's not intuitive in our culture, but in other cultures that have been in the past and other cultures around the world, they focus more on a joint relationship with nature, working with nature, sustainability. These aren't necessarily things that are strong in Western culture. And this idea that as we gain more power and we learn new forms of this magic, splitting atoms and things like that, it's important that we assess ourselves as human beings and ask ourselves the questions: are we capable of handling this new power that we've been given? Or are some of our old tendencies, some of our natural instincts, which aren't as desirable, could these come into play, and could this new technology, this new power, be used for a negative? And I really believe that the best way to solve these problems is for each individual person to look at themselves and make an example of themselves. We always want the latest technology, the newest iPhone, the newest laptop. We want all of this stuff, and we focus a lot on these devices, but we don't focus much on our main device, which is our bodies and our minds. So self-growth and self-development are two of the most important things that we can do in this life, and then we then pass that along down the line. If we look at ourselves, we heal ourselves, we focus on ourselves, we put out positivity, this is positive for future generations. Working tirelessly, looking at the outside world, creating new technology, I'd like to get your thoughts and ideas on this, but from what I can see, I don't see too much benefit of coming out with a new phone or a new gadget every few months. It seems that the main reason for doing this is consumerism and materialism. That the companies can make money by bringing out a new phone every few months, and people have bought into this idea that money and material objects bring happiness, when in fact they bring a very short burst of dopamine, and it's striving for pleasure. And it's easy to confuse pleasure and that feeling of, I've just got something new, this is awesome. It's easy to confuse that with the feeling of happiness and long-lasting, deep, fulfilling happiness. So I wanted to share this video, get some of your thoughts and your ideas about the technology we have. Should we maybe relax a little bit on the invention of new technologies and focus more on ourselves and the technology that is our bodies and our minds? Learning to focus on the internal world as opposed to the external world is something that I only really came into relationship in my late 20s, and it's not an easy thing to do because you're forced to face a lot of the realities of the way you are, not the way that your ego tells you that you are. So I think there's definitely a place for science. It's interesting to learn about the world, and by learning about the world around us we can learn about ourselves. But the speed of our advancement, I think maybe pumping the brakes a little bit and focusing more on ourselves for a while, so that we can then trust that with this, is, I think one of the best quotes is probably Uncle Ben in Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. And with the splitting of the atom, we had the great power, and it didn't take long that we clearly wasn't responsible with that power. So I think it's something that's worth thinking about, focusing on self-growth, self-development, and yeah, leave your comments, and thanks for listening to my ideas, really appreciate it. I'm sure I'll have many more. This is one that I'll probably revisit in the future, and yeah, look forward to seeing you in the next one.